The following is a text exchange which occurred between brothers on November 29th, 2021. 4:26 p.m. Guess which city has been crowned Slurpee Capital of the world for 22 straight years?
Detroit.
Wrong.
Miami.
Wrong.
Rancho Cucamonga.
You are terrible at this. I'm just going to tell you. It's Winnipeg.
I didn't even know they had Slurpees there.
I came across that whilst reading the nicknames of Canadian cities. If I'm ever reincarnated as another species, I want to be a Canadian. Straight from the heartland, this is Things I Text My Brother. Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of Things I Text My Brother, a series of conversations which have taken place between the brothers Drouillard on subjects spanning the neighborhood and the globe, which will hopefully leave you smarter, kinder, and better looking. Today we're going to jump off from that dramatic reading that you just heard and discuss the topics therein. Maybe we'll talk about Slurpees. Maybe we'll talk about embezzlement. Maybe we'll talk about Winnipeg, Lake Placid, Detroit, or Fruitcake. But we haven't plotted an exact course because we want you to join us on that journey. I'm Jeff. This is Brad. Let's talk about our texts. But before we return to the chilled plains of the north to take our Slurpee discussion off ice, we need to take a look back because it's always important to make time to cleanse ourselves of our past sins and to continue our boundless quest for self-improvement through worthless information. Thus it's time for ablutions and edification. This week, I'm going to start things off with some edification that I found while searching for a potential ablution. Brother Brad, do you remember episode 23, The Bouncy Fella and Imperial Russia's Greatest Love Machine?
Well, it was our last one, so I feel like I remember it.
Well, as you'll recall, and our multitude of listeners will also recall, we talked a lot about Bobby Farrell, who was the dancing fella out in front of a musical group called Boney M. I was reading some YouTube comments, and I liked one that said if he had a wireless microphone, he would have crossed the Atlantic 2 times by now. You laughed. I said something along the lines of, if he wasn't the person who was really singing, why not just expand the illusion and have him use a wireless microphone and he could have danced all over the place? And I said that was the only kind of microphone that was probably available. My potential ablution was, were wireless microphones available? Because I got to thinking to myself, we already had a person go to the moon by then. We could probably make a wireless microphone. Do you think we actually had wireless microphones by the time that Boney M performed at the Sopit Festival in 1979 Poland?
Well, I'm going to say, based on the fact that you said this wasn't an ablution, that we did not have them yet.
Wrong, because I'm going to make it a non-ablution by kind of just shading some information that I found out. It probably was the only realistic option, so let's build up a little bit to that. Wireless microphones. In the 1940s, there are hobby kits coming out. You can basically broadcast your voice to a nearby radio, but I'm talking same room. It's just something to do for fun. 1950s, there were some experiments with sporting events and minor productions. They had success, but again, very limited range. In 1964, the first American patent was issued for one designed by a person who taught at San Jose State named Ray Littke. But it wasn't until the late 1970s, until a little group called the Rolling Stones and another guy, Todd Rundgren, they were the first people to successfully use wireless mics at concerts. Later on, Kate Bush was the first person to use a wireless headset. So technically, Boney M probably could have used a wireless mic if they were on that cutting edge of technology in terms of concert use, like the Rolling Stones, like Todd Rundgren, like Kate Bush. Since only a small group of people were successfully using it, I think it's safe to say that Boney M was probably just using the standard microphone of the time. And it wasn't until the 1980s with theater productions and concerts really shifting to wireless microphones. Not an ablution because, yes, there were wireless microphones, but were there really wireless microphones available to Boney M? It's close enough. What do you think about that?
I feel like I'm the only one who's been doing ablutions lately, so I'm going to choose to think you got it wrong and that it actually was an ablution and maybe a bit of edification. I'll give you a benefit of doubt, so maybe an ablutification.
Oh, I can live with an ablutification. I'll take that. For our official scores at home, mark that one up. But I understand you have a more traditional bit of edification for us. What do you have?
I do. I'm going to take us all the way back to episode 11, Lawless Loopholes and Lost Dakotas. One of our top 24 finest episodes, don't you think?
Awesome episode.
Well, we talked about the fact that there's a small slice of Idaho contiguous to Yellowstone where it might not be possible to prosecute someone for a jury requiring major trial. A theory has not been tested, but it could happen.
Sure.
So anyway, I've been reading a lot about Antarctica lately, and I was wondering about what might happen in the event of a major crime in Antarctica. And as it so happens, so have others, and some of those people work for the How Stuff Works website.
Oh.
It turns out, much like Loophole Land, there are questions as to how this could even work. So if you were at a research base, like there's a bunch of research bases down there for different countries. If you were at a U.S. research base and there was a murder, a major crime, there's a good chance you'd be able to prosecute the case in the U.S. Not a guarantee if there were people from two different countries, but they'd probably come together and allow it to happen.
Sure.
The same thing is true if you lost your cool at Norway's Troll Station.
Troll Station?
Yes, they have a station in Antarctica called Troll Station that's named after the jagged mountains that look like trolls from Norse mythology. But what if you were trekking with a companion over the open ice on a research trip, and said companion would not stop saying, "Is that a penguin? Is that a penguin?" over and over again every time you saw a penguin, and you just had to put an end to it, and you happened to slip while you were holding the ladder over a crevasse as your annoying companion was crossing.
Sure.
All right, that's when you enter Loophole Land or Yellowstone Zone of Death territory. In theory, both countries could come together and agree where to prosecute the crime, but if there was a new Cold War between, say, Argentina and New Zealand, and the countries didn't agree where to prosecute, but the crime could fall into a gray area that has no resolution.
I love that. But what if Argentina and New Zealand get into a Cold War where they're actually fighting with cold materials? Who would win? For the purpose of this question, assume that both countries are fighting at their prime and have had time to train.
Well, if your cold weather items are one group has a penguin from Antarctica and one has a polar bear from the Arctic, I'm going to go with whoever has the polar bear as their weapon of choice.
What if we took it as Lionel Messi versus Bilbo Baggins? And Bilbo Baggins, he has the polar bear.
Well, Bilbo Baggins is not from New Zealand, but he might have been filmed there at one time. I don't think the size of the competitor matters when you actually are looking at the weapons at hand. So I'm still going to go with Bilbo Baggins and the polar bear.
Excellent call.
Plus, Bilbo could be invisible with the one ring.
Well, Brad, I feel like I definitely learned about the lawlessness of Antarctica. Thank you for edifying both myself and our audience.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Okay, it's time to get to our original text exchange, but we always start out with you telling us something. Where are we going first today, Brother Brad?
Well, where to start?
Yeah.
First, while Slurpees are fine and all,
Yeah.
I believe you and I can both agree they are not as good as slush puppies.
Oh, agreed. When I'm drinking a Slurpee, it is a beverage of convenience. It's the frozen slushiness that I have access to.
Secondly, I would like to point out that my Detroit guess as to what city drinks the most, you did tell me that I'm not very good at this. I want to say that I'm not actually as bad as you made it sound like.
It did seem like a harsh assessment, yeah.
It felt harsh to me, so I looked it up. So according to the editors at the Eat This, Not That website, using Google search trends, it appears that Slurpee was the most popular soft drink-related beverage searched for in Michigan. And with Detroit being the largest city in Michigan,
Yep.
I feel like that's a pretty good guess. And then Convenience Store News also backs this up when they were talking about a Slurpee being launched into space in 2021.
Whoa.
They also noted that Michigan consumes the most in the United States.
Did you happen to realize that Detroit is actually the second highest city in the world for consumption, according to 7-Eleven and official stats?
I didn't look that up.
Yeah, that's why I was saying it was harsh. You actually guessed the second highest Slurpee consumption city in the world, and all I told you was wrong.
Then you told me I wasn't very good at it, and then it hurt my feelings. So I went and looked this up, and so the good people at Eat This, Not That made me feel better about myself.
Yeah, I looked at Slurpee stats from all different numbers of places.
Yeah.
Detroit would be the number one Slurpee consumption place in the United States of America, which is a pretty good guess. But I just want to point out that I did absolutely know at the time I texted you that Detroit was second, but I did not give you that kind of credit.
I would expect nothing less from you.
You have anything else along those lines you wanted to talk about?
Other than to say, if you ever were reincarnated as another species, you'd want to be a Canadian.
True, I said that.
Are you stating that Canadians are a different species, or that if you happen to come back as a different species, that you would like to live in Canada? I was just curious which way you were going with that.
Well, I do assume that I will be reincarnated as some other species, so that's a given.
Where in Canada do you see yourself being reincarnated to?
I don't know if I get to choose that. I've only really spent time in Ontario, a bit of Quebec, and Vancouver, and I liked all those places. So I'm going to say, based on that, Nova Scotia.
Works for me.
Yeah, me too.
All right. When looking up Slurpees, I was curious when they were invented and where they came from.
Sure.
And a Slurpee actually is an icy with a different name. The icy being invented by Omar Knedlik or Knedlik. I don't know how you pronounce it.
I thought it was Knedlik. Knedlik.
Oh, maybe I missed the L.
That's my guess.
I'm just going to go with Omar.
Yep.
Omar invented the Slurpee while owning a Dairy Queen.
Mm-hmm.
So how close did we come to not being able to have one of our other favorite treats, a Blizzard, being available? Because what if Omar had sold the icy to Dairy Queen in the mid-50s? Then that became what Dairy Queen were known for, and they wouldn't have invented the Blizzard in the mid-80s.
I don't have an answer for you.
I would be sad.
Yeah. Well, as consumers of Slurpees and various slushy-related products, be they carbonated like the 7-Eleven Slurpee or non-carbonated like the Slush Puppy, I did use this as an opportunity just to dive a little bit into the Slurpee history with Omar from Kansas and into a little bit of 7-Eleven statistical type stuff. I was fascinated to find out that Omar was a World War II veteran from Kansas. He was running a Dairy Queen franchise. He had his sodas in the freezer, and because of the sugar content, they didn't quite freeze, and they became this popular drink. But he was smart. He reached out to an organization which helped him build a machine, and by the mid-1960s, he had this air conditioner that could basically produce ices, which was what he was making. But he went out and let some other people buy his invention, and eventually 7-Eleven came back to him and said, "We want this." And he said, "Okay, you can sell these if you give them a different name than icy, and if you basically sign a non-compete clause," so they couldn't operate in the same market. So Slurpees, that name was come up with in-house at 7-Eleven, but it was Omar's invention on a non-compete clause. I would have never guessed that Slurpee's origins were so directly tied to icy, and even more so, I wouldn't have guessed that they were tied to Dairy Queen. That was pretty cool to find out. In Winnipeg itself, well, the Slurpee first made it to Canada in 1969. It was first sold in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Not quite as many 7-Elevens in Canada as there are in the United States. I found numbers that there's something like 10,000 7-Elevens in the United States, under 700 in Canada. In spite of that...
Wait, under 700?
Yeah.
That's not as many as I would have thought if they have the city with the most Slurpees.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, but I did read several articles talking about why Winnipeg. So for those not familiar with Winnipeg, join the club. I think that's most of us.
Ooh, I know something about Winnipeg.
What's that?
There was a show called Less Than Kind that was set in Winnipeg, and they had a theme song called One Great City that ends with the line, "I hate Winnipeg."
I hate Winnipeg.
And that is the sum total of what I know about Winnipeg.
Well, my basic research told me just a little more. First off, it is cold up there a lot of the time, certainly in the winter. So 40% of the Slurpee sales happen there, as they do in many places during the summer months. But in 2021, July of 2021, Winnipeg was named the Slurpee Capital of the World for the 22nd straight year. Detroit would, in essence, be the Slurpee Capital of the United States and has been running on that for a while. I read an article on the website The Thrillist written by Emily Barron-Kadloff about how did Winnipeg become the Slurpee Capital of the World. And it just is. People have been drinking it forever. They love it. But it's also become this mark of pride. So that's why they keep buying Slurpees, I think. According to this article that I saw, there are Winnipeggers who sport Slurpee tattoos. A search in Winnipeg buy and sell elicits multiple commercial-grade Slurpee machines for sale. They sell handmade Slurpee koozies up there. Winnipeggers are known to fill milk jugs, crock pots, fish bowls, rubber boots, and even kiddie pools with the frozen drink. I've even seen people who allegedly filled up sleds, so eventually Slurpee had to go back and basically say during those fill your own container days, you're not allowed to bring your kitchen sink, you're not allowed to bring trash cans and all these kind of things. But yeah, people in Winnipeg definitely love their Slurpees. It said in this article that it is the most requested beverage in maternity wards. It is consumed by many at breakfast time. And I even heard that at meetups at the airport, when you're welcoming the person, it is not uncommon for people from Winnipeg to have Slurpees available for their beloved person who is returning home.
Oh.
One last 7-Eleven fact that I wanted to get to. Did you know that the phrase brain freeze, for those headaches that occur, ice cream headache in essence, did you know that 7-Eleven now owns the phrase brain freeze, its trademark?
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I know they ran an ad campaign about brain freeze. I remember seeing it on like MTV or something when we were kids.
Yeah. That got me wondering about brain freeze. Ice cream headaches, officially the cold stimulus headache. Do you know much about this, Brad? Have you had ice cream headaches, brain freeze?
I have had what I believe to be considered brain freeze, yes, but I don't really know much about it.
Let's dig into brain freeze, shall we?
Okay, I feel like we're about to.
The official name is Sphenopalatine Ganglioneuralgia.
Ooh.
Sphenopalatine Ganglioneuralgia. Say it.
No.
Sphenopalatine Ganglioneuralgia. So that is the official name. If you were to be drinking a Slurpee or a Slush puppy or something right now, and you had a brain freeze, the most common answer, how do you solve it, is just to let it take care of itself. It might last a few seconds or a couple minutes. If it lasts longer than that, by the way, you might want to contact a doctor because it could be a sign of atrial fibrillation or it could be some other kind of problem. But generally speaking, it takes care of itself quickly. If you want to take care of it faster, do you know the solution that I found from multiple sources?
Put your index finger in between your eyes and press.
The main answer that I saw listed is put your tongue up against the roof of your mouth. It's a cold response that's happening in the roof of your mouth, basically related to blood flow and resistance in the blood vessels of the brain. So you need to warm it up fast. Put your tongue up against the top of your mouth. That's a fast warm-up. Or even the articles I saw suggested putting your thumb up against the top of the inside of your mouth.
I feel like it's more sanitary to use your tongue than your thumb.
Yeah, you're probably right about that one. That exhausts my knowledge on Slurpees and 7-Eleven, except to say that if anybody wants a free Slurpee, 7-Eleven Day is on July 11th every year, and you get a free Slurpee until supplies run out.
Well, what's your chosen flavor of Slurpee? What are you going to get on your free Slurpee day?
Well, apparently, I would have as many as 34 different choices if I was going in the United States, or over 300 different choices if I include some of the world flavors. But I tend to keep it pretty simple. I go with the red one, which is usually cherry in the places I get it, or I get the basic Coca-Cola one, or I'm always a fan of blue drinks, so whatever blue is, I would get that. How about you?
Probably Mountain Dew or Coca-Cola. I did see on a blog called Now That's Nifty that there were over 300 different flavors, including such flavors as Mango Bango, Kissing Cousin, Moonshine.
Well, what is the flavor profile of Kissing Cousin?
I didn't actually look it up, but that was part of an advertisement campaign they did. They did Pink Fink and Kissin' Cousin, Moonshine, and a few other flavors. Icky something. They did a whole bunch of different flavors as an advertisement campaign for Slurpees when AM stations were fighting with FM stations for listeners still. They ran all these different ads on the AM stations to try to keep the demographic they wanted on AM instead of moving to FM. And so they ran all these Slurpee ads and competitions and stuff on there. And they came up with these crazy names. And so they basically had a different flavor on a regular basis. And they encouraged people to go try them. They had pins for the different flavors. So if you had one of the flavors, you got a pin that you could get for it. But my favorite of all the flavor names was 7-Eleven.
7-Eleven. I saw that one, yeah.
I like that one a lot. And since I saw it on the internet, it's probably true. And they have the internet on computers now, you know.
Yeah.
The only other thing I learned about 7-Eleven that I hadn't heard about was in the early 1980s, they sponsored one of the most successful American cycling teams. So this team made up of a bunch of amateurs. In 1981, they started, and they had some success placing some riders in the Olympics. After the 1984 Olympics, they turned professional and they were successful, and they kind of helped bring American teams into Europe and all that stuff. But what I found fascinating was there was a huge intersection in the beginning of the 7-Eleven team between top-level amateur cyclists who became professional and speed skaters. The founder of the team was a speed skater and a coach of the speed skating team. But one of the founding members was Eric Hayden, who won 5 gold medals in speed skating at the 1980s Olympics, both in short and long races, which is usually unheard of. As an individual, he won 5 gold medals, which is more than any other team won in 1980 Olympics except for Soviet Union and East Germany had 10 and 9. So he won 5 gold medals at that Olympics. The United States won 6 gold medals in the 1980 Olympics. Can you name the other medal?
Oh, 1980 Winter Olympics.
Eric Hayden won 5. Who won the other one?
Who is icy? Mr. Freeze.
No. Does the Miracle on Ice ring any bells?
Yes, we beat those Russians.
Yeah, the hockey team was the other gold medal.
Oh, yeah. Lake Placid.
So a lot of people actually ended up with gold medals, even though technically they only won 6 gold medals.
Yeah.
That's what I got about 7-Eleven and Slurpees. Where are you going to take us?
Well, yeah, let's shift gears. This all started with me looking at different nicknames for Canadian cities, probably because I saw something on Canadian football game and just started looking. So within that list is where I found the Slurpee Capital of the World with Winnipeg, and then that launched us into a lot of the stuff that we just talked about. Going back to that list, I was curious today, was there anything else really interesting? If I told you that a Canadian city is known as the honeymoon capital of the world, which one would that be?
Niagara.
Niagara Falls, yeah. I only found about 10 different places on the list I was looking at that used the specific phrase blank capital of the world, obviously with the blank replaced by a something. Out of the 10, a couple of them were salmon. You had Niagara Falls with the honeymoon capital, scallops, icebergs, and polar bears, they all appeared. That wasn't enough for me to get really excited about. But I ended up doing a pretty deep dive on American cities then. In fact, I went to this list called City Nicknames and Slogans on a website I've never heard of called offices.net. And then on that list, I did a Control F search for the phrase capital of the world. If a place calls itself the Rose City, I'm not interested. But if they called themselves the Rose Capital of the World, they would have come up in my search. Through that, I found 171 different cities using the phrase capital of the world after mentioning a specific thing. A lot of them are pretty basic and easy. There was the barbecue capital of the world. There was the alfalfa capital, carpet capital, earmuffs capital, seed spitting, execution, broccoli, Appalachian square dance capital of the world, barbed wire capital of the world, barbecued mutton capital of the world, the Bigfoot capital of the world, and let me ask you one more. Where is the walleye capital of the world, Brad?
Walleye capital of the world is in Ohio.
Yeah, do you know where? It's a place in our county of origin.
Port Clinton.
Yes, Port Clinton is the walleye capital of the world. If I'm not mistaken, they had, maybe still have a walleye drop on New Year's, which I've never seen. So those were just some of the random ones. I did go through the list and look for some of my favorites, or some of the more unique ones. So Cedar Bluff, Alabama. The crappie capital of the world. What's a crappie, Brad?
It's a fish.
Yeah, it's a freshwater fish in the sunfish family. Berrien Springs, Michigan. The Christmas pickle capital of the world. Did you know that?
I didn't. I would have expected it to be Frankenmuth.
Something like that, yeah. There's a place called Douglas, Wyoming, which calls itself the jackalope capital of the world. Brad, what's a jackalope?
A jackalope is a jackrabbit mixed with an antelope and was the name of my first euchre team at my office when we participated in the euchre tournament. My partner Sally Farbian and I dominated, went undefeated, and won the entire tournament.
What game was that?
Euchre.
Oh, yes.
I made jackalopes t-shirts for us and everything, where I superimposed antlers on a giant rabbit and put it in a field of sunflowers.
So the way that you created that delightful image is very much the same way that two brothers from Wyoming who happened to be hunters put deer antlers on a jackrabbit carcass that they had. They were also taxidermists, apparently, and they sold those to, I believe they sold those to a hotel. After that, they started making others. Now it's become somewhat of a common practice to see a jackalope mounted on the wall, even though a jackalope isn't a naturally occurring animal in the world. Or is it? There are many tall tales that express having seen something resembling a jackalope in the past. There's one possible scientific reason for that. It seems that rabbits in general, jackrabbits as well, do have the potential to be afflicted with a certain kind of tumor, which can happen on various parts of the body, but when it happens on the head, it can resemble a horn.
One horn? So more like a unicorn than an antelope?
I guess it depends on the amount of these tumors.
I see.
But all of this leads me to Claxton, Georgia, and Corsicana, Texas. As I happen to be going down my list of 171 different results for the such and such capital of the world in the United States, I found two places, Claxton, Georgia, and Corsicana, Texas, which claimed to be the fruitcake capital of the world. Brad, do you eat fruitcake?
I don't believe I have ever tried fruitcake, nor do I have any desire to do so.
Agreed. It looks disgusting. Maybe it's wonderful. I will probably never find out.
Same.
Although I didn't look into the other cities to find out why Berrien Springs is the Christmas pickle capital, I did look into Douglas. I didn't look into most of them because it seemed like most of the names were just because of some kind of local industry. I assumed that was the case with Claxton and Corsicana as well, that it was from an industry and that industry was probably the fruitcake. But I just wanted to know what were their two claims to it. I haven't noticed any real friction between the two in the cursory searches I did, but they are the two places in the United States claiming to be the fruitcake capital of the world. In Claxton, Georgia, pretty straightforward story. There are a couple bakeries there, the Claxton Bakery and the Georgia Fruitcake Company. They're producing mass quantities of fruitcake. Between the two of them, according to NPR, 4 million pounds of fruitcake produced by those two every year. It seems like a lot of their fruitcakes are used as fundraising type things. Even some of their initial ones were used to help raise money in a charitable type way. They're pretty well established. The town water tower says the fruitcake capital of the world on it. That's Claxton, Georgia. The story in Corsicana, Texas, not so different. There's a company there called the Collin Street Bakery, which has been making its fruitcake since the 1890s. They sell a lot of fruitcake as well. 1 million fruitcakes a year from this place in a larger city of 20-some thousand people. But none of that is all that interesting until I stumbled across the name of a person called Sandy Jenkins, and he was essentially the bookkeeper there. I say he was the bookkeeper there. As of 2013, that was no longer the case because ever since around 2004, Sandy Jenkins started embezzling from the Collin Street Bakery. Started out with a little bit of petty cash. Eventually, over the course of this decade, he stole nearly $17 million.
That's a lot.
Yeah, the company realizes we're still selling like crazy, but we're not making the profit. What's going on here? You would think that would raise some red flags.
You'd think so.
It's not how he got caught, though. There just ended up being another person in the finance department that was new to the company and saw an expense she couldn't really explain. She took it to the bosses. And then Sandy Jenkins is exposed for this. But let me tell you some stuff about what Sandy Jenkins and his wife Kay did. They used the money to fund this lavish lifestyle, and documents released by the U.S. Attorney's Office in 2015 indicated that they had taken 223 private jet trips to places like Aspen and Napa. They had bought new vehicles and luxury vehicles. Anytime that their previous car needed an oil change, they would go and buy a new car. They shopped at a Dallas area Neiman Marcus, and they had a personal shopper for them there who nicknamed Sandy as Fruitcake and his wife Kay as Cupcake. Sandy was putting $98,000 a month on a black Amex card, even though, by the way, he only had a $50,000 a year salary. So you would think there might be some kind of trail to all this. It was said in some of the documents that were released after his arrest, it was said that Sandy and Kay stopped shopping at Neiman Marcus because the store ran out of things to sell them. They basically had sampled all the inventory. Other things that were recovered at the time of their arrest were 41 bracelets, 15 pairs of cufflinks, 21 pairs of earrings, 16 furs, 61 handbags, 45 necklaces, 55 rings, 98 watches, over $580,000 in cash, wine worth over $50,000, a $58,000 plus Steinway electric piano. Ultimately, Sandy Jenkins is sentenced to 120 months in federal prison. Kay gets 5 years of probation. Sandy actually dies in prison in 2019.
But that was pretty recent.
Yeah, it was pretty recent. And I came across all this without knowing that in the beginning of December in 2021, which is only a couple months ago from the recording, there was a documentary which came out called Fruitcake Fraud, which was issued by Discovery Plus. But yes, this is a story people can look more into. It seems bonkers.
I can't believe they got away with it. Did you say $17 million?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. How do they get away with that in this day and age? And they must just not have put anything like on Facebook or anything, because surely someone would have asked the question, where are you getting all this money to spend on all this stuff?
The one thing I saw about that said that they claimed they had received an inheritance, and some of it was travel, so it wasn't all in the face of other people. But yeah, there were definitely plenty of red flags and things for people to notice as soon as it was revealed that this boring, quiet person, which is how Sandy was described, as soon as it was revealed that they had committed this, there was a lot of, oh yeah, that actually does make sense now. The one that seems like it would have been harder to explain away with some inheritance would have been a new car every time they needed an oil change. But who knows, maybe this inheritance was supposed to be from a robber baron or some kind of oil magnate or something like that.
I don't know. That's wild.
It's pretty crazy. But yeah, looking at the blank capitals of the world did yield a lot of fun stuff like that. On a related search, I happened to find out about a title along those lines, which is given to our home metropolitan area of Columbus, Ohio. Brad, question for you. If we were talking about the late 1880s, and I told you that Columbus, Ohio was the blank capital of the world based on a particular industry that was here, what would be your guess as to our hometown capital of the world in the 1880s, 90s, that time?
Soap.
It was not soap. No.
Pawpaws.
What are pawpaws?
Pawpaws are some sort of a native fruit.
Pawpaws soap. You're terrible at this game. And this time you're not actually close.
Oh.
It was the buggy, like the horse buggy.
Oh, I actually knew that.
In 1 year alone, I found out in 1883, the Columbus Buggy Company, which was owned by the Peters brothers in conjunction with a member of the Firestone family, who later went on to have all their fame in Akron with the rubber company. But the Peters brothers had over 1,000 employees of their Columbus Buggy Company and over 25,000 buggies produced in the year 1883 alone. There were 22 horse buggy companies in Columbus around that time. 1 out of every 6 horse buggies were made right here in Columbus, Ohio. Then they tried to make a car when gasoline vehicles came around. And even though they were using kind of a primitive assembly line type process, they couldn't compete with the economics of production when people like Henry Ford stepped forward and used real assembly lines in the early 1900s.
Yeah. Now I'm sad because I did actually know that.
All right. Well, one man who has never driven a horse buggy and has probably never been to Winnipeg is our Father Art, but he's still our expert on everything. So we're going to ask him some questions.
Do you feel that you would be more or less likely to drink Slurpees if you lived in Winnipeg?
There would be no change because I'm not a Slurpee guy.
Describe the amount of pride that you feel knowing that modern-day Drouillards and Drouillards have undoubtedly contributed to Detroit's status as the Slurpee capital of the United States.
I didn't know there was that connection, but I guess any notoriety is probably good if it's not negative.
Without any context, what environment and living conditions would you expect to encounter if you moved, sight unseen, to the real-life place known as Troll Station?
Oh, it would be spooky for sure, and I already feel like there are people trolling me, so I guess that would be amplified there.
Have you ever experienced Sphenopalatine Ganglioneuralgia?
Probably because I have everything else, I just didn't know it.
What is your opinion of fruitcake?
Negative, I guess, but it's really not based on much. It's been a long time. I think I probably had fruitcake from an older relative when I was very young, but I can't say it's really based on fact. It's more on faulty memory.
If you embezzled nearly $17 million from a bakery which specializes in making fruitcake, how many of each of the following would you have bought? Bracelets.
None.
Cars.
Oh, probably one.
Handbags.
None.
Steinway electric pianos.
Probably 3.
Probably 3. Yes, probably 3.
Well, folks, now that we've heard from Father Art, it means that our time together is coming to an end for this episode. We've said just about everything we're prepared to say about brain freeze, Sphenopalatine Ganglioneuralgia, jackalopes, taxidermy, Christmas pickles, the Rolling Stones, Steinway electric pianos, and Troll Station. But fear not, just as soon as we can dig back into the archives and find another gem of a text exchange, there will be another episode coming your way. In the meantime, you can head over to our Instagram page at Things I Text My Brother Podcast to drop us a note about what you liked, what you didn't like, or to tell us something that we got totally wrong. You might even have enough time to go tell a friend, an enemy, and a total stranger to give us a listen as well. If you manage to do any of that, the Fraternity of Drouillards will be forever grateful. And if you go join our blood donation team at Things I Text My Brother Podcast on the American Red Cross app, even better. But most importantly, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Testing. Testing 3, 2, 1.
Is that true? Did our father never work on the line?
No.
That's a good call. But, yeah, that is a good call. It'd be... I don't have anything to say. Yes, that's a good call.
Boom. Boom.